Welcome to the Eating at a Meeting podcast. I'm your host, Tracy Stuckrath, dietary needs expert, certified meetings manager, certified food protection manager. I have searched the globe to find people and businesses who are creating safe, sustainable, and inclusive food and beverage experiences for their employees, guests, and communities. In each episode, you will find authentic conversations about how food and beverage impacts inclusion, sustainability, culture, community, health, and wellness. I know that sounds like a lot, but we're going to cover it all. Are you ready to feed engagement, nourish inclusion, and bolster your bottom line? If so, let's go.
Hi, everybody. Jacqui, Caroline, and I were talking behind the scenes, and it's showtime. So, hi, I'm Tracy Stuckrath, and I am the founder of Thrive Meetings and Events and this podcast, Eating at a Meeting. And this is Food Allergy Awareness Week. And I am happy to be here with two of the food safety, food allergy trainers in the UK, in my opinion. And they're very adamant about doing this and making sure that we're all feel confident in this. I've had conversations the last 3 days, so check them out. They're live on the podcast as well. And we got 2 more days ahead. And my scratchy throat is from traveling from West Coast to East Coast and making sure that I was here. So excuse my scratchy throat for today. But with me today is, below me is Jacqui McPeake. She has had a successful career in the hospitality industry. She was the head of catering to a large university and led her team to win awards for the work they did to manage food allergies for their students. Kudos to you, Jacqui. Thank you. And then Caroline is founder of the award-winning company Food Allergy Aware, which is in its 9th year. She has worked across all sectors of hospitality, including hospital catering, international cruise lines, high street brands, garden centers, and pub chains. Hi, ladies. How are you?
Hi, good afternoon.
Thanks for inviting us.
So how did the both of you get involved in food allergies in the first place? What was the impetus for you doing this?
So from my point of view, I had a large team, more than 65 people in my team. We had 13 restaurants, cafe bars, and we had 36,000 students. And I went to a seminar at the start of the change of a law, and the speaker said that students living away from home for the first time, if they have an allergy, are the most vulnerable. And I thought, great, that's my customer group. So I realised that I had a real need to make sure that we got it right. So we did a lot of training, a lot of awareness. We had student focus groups. We changed our menus. And then suddenly, out of the blue, my youngest daughter, I've got 3 children, she started to feel quite unwell with various food groups, couldn't work out what was happening. I was going into work with stress whilst my daughter was sick at home. She was 14 at the time, she's 22 now, and of course it was food allergies and intolerances. So a complete change of diet for her at the age of 14. She's severely gluten intolerant, lactose intolerant, no potatoes, no eggs, and at the time various fruits and tomatoes were also out of her diet. So I had to learn as a parent and also lead my team to get it right. So that's kind of why I'm so passionate, because when she goes out to eat, she has to be really quite careful. She's not anaphylactic, but she could be ill for a couple of days afterwards. So that fueled my passion. So I left my role 4 years ago to start my business, to share my experience of working in the hospitality industry, and also pointing out that it could be my child, somebody else's family member that struggles to eat out. So let's make this, accessible for all.
Okay, awesome. And there's some questions I have from you from that, but let's hear from Caroline real quick too.
So my journey is, I'm in hospitality, always been in hospitality for a number of years. But when my son he's 22, I noticed there's some problems with my diet, some issues. And it took probably about 8 or 10 years to realise it was what I was eating. So eventually my doctor said, well, I think it sounds like you should avoid gluten. And then we found out that dairy was an issue. So, it was all about a personal journey and then trying to make a difference. When I went out to eat, there was no choice. There was no options. And people didn't really understand, having a choice. And then my son, he actually became poorly when he was quite young, probably about 8 or 9, he got food poisoning. And then he began to develop a food intolerance. He wasn't able to, we found out eventually it was gluten and dairy again. So now at the age of 22, there's 2 of us in our family that can't tolerate it. And I think just really trying to impress on the hospitality industry actually you can provide for the free-from customer. You can make things accessible, and it's just really about, trying to get that message across, really.
That's awesome. And I think this industry and around food allergies and celiac and all of that, the people that are leading the movement for change are the people who are experiencing it the most, right? And we want change. Now, Jacqui, you mentioned in your answer to me, you were at the university and the law was changing. Mm-hmm. Are you talking about the EU 1169?
That's right, 2014. So the law changed. And at the time, actually, working in the industry, we didn't really have much information. It kind of drifted through. It was very, very clear what we had to do. We just knew we had to do something, and messages were coming through. We had to change all our recipes. We had to make sure that we knew exactly what was in each menu item. Mm-hmm. Such to the point that we had a really nice Jamaican jerk chicken recipe, actually, from one of our Jamaican chefs, and he refused to give us the recipe. Point blank refused. It had been handed down through generations, and he didn't want to give the secret ingredients. So I said, well, okay, it's not going on the menu. So we had, lots of work to do behind the scenes and kind of working through our menus, making sure the data was okay, and also getting the training done, because we also had a lot of agency teams working for us and students working part-time. So we'd, quite a raft of training that we had to do. So obviously, my awareness was already raised due to all of that.
Right.
And when my daughter started being sick on a regular basis, I thought, this is strange. Yeah.
Coincidence. An unfortunate coincidence. Now, and so with the EU 1169, for everyone to know, it takes it a little bit further than the U.S. law, because the U.S. law's Food Allergy Labeling and Consumer Protection Act says you have to label prepackaged foods for the top 9 allergens. Well, now it's 9, before it was 8. But 1169 says you have to label all on unpackaged foods as well for the 14 allergens, right?
Exactly, yes. So whatever allergens and ingredients are in each recipe, when asked by a customer, you have to be able to provide that information. You don't have to serve them. So if it's impossible to provide that meal choice, you can say so. If it's going to be a risk to them, but you have to be able to provide. If I say, is there gluten in that product, and they say, well, I'm not sure, that's not acceptable. They have to know what's in the product.
And I think that's just important in general, right? Yeah. All right, I'm going to move.
The other thing I would say that, I don't know that it went far enough, in the sense that the loose food, they only had to identify the 14 allergens, whereas obviously there's more allergens outside the 14. There's over 250 foods out there that, can cause a reaction for people. Basically, they'd have a label, they'd keep all the information about the 14 allergens, but the rest of the ingredients would go by the wayside with loose food. The Natasha's Law, which I'm sure we'll talk about, obviously went that bit further to have full ingredients and having to have the 14 highlighted. But again, I think to a certain degree, the law needs to go that little bit further to make sure that people keep labeling for everything. They keep the labels, and they're able to tell exactly what's in the food and not just the 14 allergens. At the moment, that's all they do have to do by the regulation.
Okay, so let's talk about that. Let's dissect that a little bit. Because, okay, Jacqui, in the back of the house, right, you get this box of flour, or you get this box of whatever. Do you take it out of that box and put it in a container in your storage unit without the label? Is that typically the process?
Label. So if you decant from one large container into a smaller container, you must relabel that smaller container. You can either cut it from the box and stick it on there, or ideally you've got a label printer where you print out all the ingredients and you know exactly what the product is. If it's flour, it will go into a flour bin with a lid on. On top of that lid, it will clearly say, self-raising flour, whatever, contains gluten. Using allergen labels to highlight, whichever allergen is in there. Even if you decant peanuts into a smaller box or container with a lid, you still need to highlight contains nuts, peanuts.
Okay.
So the next person knows.
Right. And I would think that it would need to be on a couple sides of the box, not just on the top, especially if you put another box on top of it. Right. Yeah. Okay. So just by listening to the two of you just say those things, and Jacqui, you're like, the law's changing and we have to change what our process is. I mean, that's daunting.
Yeah.
I mean, how can you, And then just going back with some conversations that we were having before we got online, it's like, I was with a hotel and they kept telling me, they weren't worried about the gluten. They were just worried about the nuts. And another company's worried about the gluten. I'm like, avoiding gluten does not contain gluten containing ingredients or whatever. Right. So how do you make people feel confident in doing this in the back of the house so they're not scaring away and say, oh, no, don't come into my restaurant or my hotel?
We need to have a robust procedure in place. So each member of the team needs to know exactly what their role is, how to manage. So I've said before we were speaking that actually, in our normal kitchen, you have lots of allergens normally. So also known as ingredients.
Right.
So using the term allergens, people say, oh, we've got all the allergens in our kitchen. Of course you have, because allergens are ingredients. We have fish, we have milk, we have bread, we have flour, in a normal kitchen. It's what you do with those ingredients, which is so important. So, you don't just leave them all on the table and hope for the best. You put them away properly in the proper place, in the fridge, in the stores. You make sure you keep the labels. And when somebody asks for a meal which is milk-free or gluten-free, the milk stays in the fridge, the bread stays in the bread bin. You don't, you clean the table, you have a procedure in place, and you communicate this to the customer. So, yes, we've got procedures in place. Yes, of course, we wash your hands. We'll make it in separate, preparation area if we've got that space. And we'll do all I can to make sure that your meal is suitable for you.
Okay, now I want to jump to Caroline real quick. And Caroline, when I first went over and met you on my trip to Poland in 2015, I'm like, I'm just going to stop over and see Caroline. You showed me a grid, which is a lot of restaurants are doing here in the States, the chain restaurants that have more than 20 locations, right?
Yeah.
But it's showing the menu items down on one side and then the allergens with little dots underneath it. I mean, doing that process, and Jacqui, you can pipe in here too. That's a challenging prospect or project, I should say. Can you explain, how that helps?
I think a lot of them, we're seeing people going over to software now. And Jacqui and I are aware there's a free software company out there which is helping businesses to try and get the allergen labelling done in a more efficient manner. But there are businesses that are using it. So the Food Standard Agency, they had their chart, which I think was the one I showed you. But we also had an Excel spreadsheet, which again is a free download of the website. But again, it's all auto filled for you. I think it is a manual process to start with. Once you've got it all in there, it's going to be easier. It's going to be much more adept at getting it right. But the thing is checking for changes, for recipe changes, for ingredient changes. I think if you're using a software, it's going to be a lot easier than obviously doing a manual process. But it depends on how big your menu is, etc. But I think it's keeping people safe. And having it written down and having a matrix is a lot better than just being able to have it in your head or, in a different way. You need to have it written down, although it's not in the UK required such. You need to provide the information, but it needs to be verifiable and it needs to be consistent. And the only way to do that is to make sure that it is in a written format, whether it be online or whether it be manual.
Well, and it was interesting that I saw a comment recently somewhere. It's like, you need to call ahead because the menu that's posted online might not be the menu that's actually being developed or served in a restaurant currently, or even in a hotel. The venue that I worked at, they're like, yeah, that's a 4-year-old menu. We've altered some of it. So you actually have to ask those questions all the time.
Yeah, definitely. And I think, just looking at menus online, I had an example back in January of a hotel not a hotel, as an attraction in London, which is 5-star, who mislabeled online. And when I contacted them to try and tell them, it took them 3.5 months to actually make a change, even though, trying to inform them. And even the labelling in-house, because I actually visited the place as well, that was incorrect. And that was still taking them, they're saying, oh, perhaps the pearl barley was gluten-free. It's like, okay. So again, it's making sure like you said, that things are kept up to date and kept current and put dates on those type of menus so that people can actually say, oh, okay, so that is an old menu from 2020. I am going to check just in case. But yeah.
I mean, yeah, because well, and I told the story. I'm like, I picked an item because it was a peppadew pepper stuffed with cheese. And then come to find out like 4 days beforehand, oh, we serve that on a crostini. I'm like, well, nowhere on here does it say that it's served on a crostini. So I picked it because it was gluten-free on your menu, or it reads gluten-free. I should say it reads gluten-free. It's not labeled. So that's that inconsistency. Yeah. Okay. So you two have started to collaborate. I mean, you have collaborated, but you started a new company, Haas UK, Hospitality Allergen
Support
UK. So tell everybody what that does and what your intent with that organization is.
So basically, Caroline and I, we've known each other for a while now. So we're not in competition because we're at different ends of the UK. So I'm in the north and Caroline's down in Southampton in the south. So we're not competition. We work together. We've got the same values. We have the same attitude towards making sure that we educate, inform, support our clients. We provide training, audits, etc. So we decided that we could reach perhaps more people as a joint business rather than just one person trying to do everything. So we can reach larger companies with our Haas UK company, which we also offer the same kind of services, so training, audits, speaking opportunities, etc.
Okay, awesome. And you're running a campaign, which I think is really interesting, called the Near Miss Campaign. And I brought it up to my friend Sarah Jane last weekend, and she's in quality control for renewable energy. And she's like, yeah, near misses. I know what that means, because she's trying to avoid a near miss of somebody falling down on a rug and cracking their head open, right? Nothing happened because that was a near miss, right? Like if they don't crack their head open, they just fell. But explain that in this allergen ingredient world in the back of the house.
Definitely.
And in the front of the house.
Yeah. So again, I think, Tracy, similar to your friend, I work for a company called Pratt & Whitney, and they make aircraft and engines, and they have a quality system which is second to none called ACE, called Achieving Competitive Excellence. And they have a way of reporting near misses. They're basically customer escapes should never go out the door. Literally, it's something we should all pick up on. And they used to do a thing where you raise a turnback ticket. So what we're trying to encourage is for hospitality businesses to recognise that there may be a potential issue. So they've made a mistake with an allergen and they've just caught it in time. But actually, next time they might not do. Next time it could have the potential to kill. So Jacqui spoke at the allergy show last year in Birmingham, and she did a talk on the near miss reporting. And it was surprising. We asked into the audience, their experiences. And there were people that put their hands up to say, yeah, I reported it to the chef. And he said, well, you didn't die, did you? So you're still here. And it's like, actually, that's like, oh my God, that's, there for the grace of God. But it could have done. And what have you done about it? How have you documented it? How have you reported it? And are you logging it? And we're aware, obviously, that Natasha with Pret a Manger tragically died after eating the baguette with sesame flour in it. So Pret a Manger were warned by at least 6, maybe more families that there was an issue with their labelling, with the sesame. But at the time, they weren't able to capture those incidences, those reporting, because nothing actually happened. It was a near miss. Someone was saying this is a potential to go wrong, and they weren't able to log it. So maybe if they had logged it and they'd looked for a pattern and they'd done the root cause analysis, maybe Natasha would be with us today. But we need to make sure that we work super hard and challenge so that doesn't happen again for other people in the future. We need people to step forward and say, this has happened. We need to log it. How could this have potentially harmed somebody? And then see if it happens again and put a strict process in place. I'd like to, to highlight Pret a Manger do have a process in place now where they do log near misses. They do look at them and monitor them with their management team on a very regular basis. They also work with other high street brands. They've got like a working group that they work with, and they share best practice. They share how to prevent it. I think one of the things, I spoke to a local environmental health officer, and they were saying they go into businesses and they have food management systems like SFBB, which is Safer Food, Better Business in the UK, and I'm sure there's something similar in the US. And literally at the back, there's a place where you can report accidents and near misses. And they're saying it's never completed. No one ever fills it in because they feel that they're going to get dumbed down or they're going to get shouted down by the environmental health. They'd rather see that was filled out and the information was completed, and then they show the actions to make sure it doesn't happen again, than have nothing in there. Because no business is perfect. We all know that things can potentially happen, and things nearly do, whether it be because of the human element, whether it's equipment, whether it's time or staff shortages. But we need to understand why it is and make sure that we put something in place to show it doesn't happen. So, yeah, Jacqui and I are very keen to push that forward.
Yeah, we feel it should be part of the procedure. So if somebody makes a complaint, instead of the flippant, oh, well, you're still here kind of attitude, which does happen, there's actually, oh, well, it now needs to be reported to the manager, the supervisor, and we'll get back to you within 10 days or whatever the case might be. I mean, there are some people that do this, some places do this, but it's a learning curve. Right. And in my experience, in previous health and safety meetings, there was always an agenda item near misses. And it would be, like you say, somebody could have fallen over a tripped wire or a carpet or whatever it might have been. And that carpet needs fixing, that wire needs, what it might be. And there's an action and a name put by that action. And the next meeting we say, has it been done? So this should be for part of the procedure. Has it been done? Who's responsible? And to feed back to the consumer so that they recognise that it's taken seriously. It's not just, brushed under that carpet. It to be seen as a learning curve. Thank goodness that nothing happens, as Caroline said there, for the grace of God. Nothing's happened that the person's told us about it. We'll learn from it and we'll be gracious about it. Thank you for telling us.
And also, and because you don't want somebody to die. I mean, you don't want that to happen. Like a near miss is something, hey, let's fix it. But go ahead, Caroline.
Yeah, I think it's also trying to encourage a no-blame culture internally within your business. So if somebody comes back and says that there's an issue, that they don't feel intimidated, that they can sort of say it quite openly. I was at a conference and I was served food on the second day of the conference, still with warning that I'm gluten and dairy free. They tried to serve me a chicken tikka roll, which I had to say did have yogurt in, and then they came out with a roll which had chorizo in that had milk in, and then I had to send that back. And, I had to follow up and see how it is. And to be fair, I've had a conversation with the people that actually run the catering this week, and they are actually looking into it. And I said, was it ever reported? And he said, not really, but someone remembered it happening. And I said, was that young girl frightened because it was the chef? So she didn't want to report it because she felt she was reporting on the chef. The chef maybe intimidated. It's just trying to understand that process, but it's not about blame. It's trying to make sure it doesn't happen again.
Right. Yeah. I mean, and it actually reminds me of a story a couple of years ago, and I've told the story before, but I was drinking a drink and the label on the buffet said kale and spinach and whatever, but my throat started to get scratchy and went back, and long story short, the server had come out, pulled a note out of her pocket and had written down what she saw the chef making. And it had included pineapple, and that restaurant or that hotel had 2 different recipes with the same name. And when they had a chef switch, the chef, they didn't change the label out front, but they started making the difference in the back. And that's a near miss, right? Yeah. And that should be solved. Let's get rid of one of those recipes.
Or so, as Caroline said, it's all part of due diligence. And the EH officers or whoever's checking would far rather see some documentation to say we recognised it, we've done something about it, and it's a record of processes. It's due diligence.
Yeah, exactly. And I think any business does that. And it's not out, like you said, Pratt Whitney and my friend in renewable energy. And that's how you make change. You figure out what went wrong as an event planner. All right, well, no, we don't want that over there because that's going to happen, right? It just has to happen in the back of the house, but also in the front of the house too, right?
Definitely. And I think, just comparing Pratt and Whitney, they take people's lives into their hands every day in an aircraft. They can't afford to get a nut and bolt wrong. We in the hospitality industry take people's lives into our hands with our food. They trust us to provide them with a safe meal. And literally, we need to make sure that is followed through.
Right. That's so true. I mean, and you have the term duty of care. You have a duty of care when you open a restaurant to provide a safe environment, right?
Exactly.
Yeah. and because you're responsible for feeding people, and just as a mom, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So what does a safe, sustainable, and inclusive food and beverage experience mean to the two of you?
I think from my point of view, to go out and, as Caroline says, when you've got severe allergies or even just severe intolerances, knowing that you might be sick if you eat something for a few days, you're naturally cautious and nervous if you go to a new restaurant. So you will check in advance. You probably ring them in advance. What we want to see is good communication and an attitude that actually will make you welcome. We can serve you. So when you go to the restaurants, they've got the booking, they welcome you, they explain your menu has been, chosen with care, and they can look after you. They recognise it. You're not a nuisance. You've got a right to eat out and be safe.
Right.
The food and also the menu, as Caroline's pointed out before, you should have a choice on the menu. You don't just want to be faced with fruit salad every time you go out to eat. There are lots of foods that are naturally gluten-free, lots of vegetables. You just need to be creative. When we worked at the university, actually, our directorate, who had a lot of VIP dinners, 2 or 3 a month, 8 out of 12 directorate had dietary requirements.
Oh, wow.
So our chefs had to be creative, so they didn't have fruit salad every time they ate. So it's about, using your imagination, because there are, a wide variety of meals out there which can be cooked safely, and it's part of everyday life. There are going to be people within that group of people that need a meal created separately for them.
Yep.
So definitely. And I agree with everything that Jacqui's saying. And I think it's also about being proactive. You should have information on your website about what your allergy policy is, what your procedure is, what you can supply, and how you can provide. People shouldn't go onto a social media group or a Facebook group or whatever and say, have you been to this venue? What's it like? You should be able to actively say on your website exactly what you can provide. We're working with some hospitals at the moment, and I was at the Hospital Caterers Association, and one of the things that I raised was on their website, have they got a website or a page linked to their catering team saying how good they are and what they're doing, because they're trying to promote how well hospital caterers are at the moment with the food review. And then I said, do you have anything on there about allergens, how you provide for them? If somebody has a multiple allergy and they're going in for a planned pregnancy or, to give birth or a planned procedure, they want to go on that website and see how they can be provided for or who they can contact. But time and time again, I see people on social media pages saying, I'm going to this hospital, is it any good? And it's like, that shouldn't be there. It should be on the venue. They should be the ones that are proactive in being able to give that information out, frequently asked questions, of where you can find stuff.
Well, and it's like the girl who went into the emergency room with a peanut allergy reaction, and then they served her a peanut butter and jelly sandwich. Like, hello, right?
Yeah.
I mean, how do you? She can't do that beforehand, right? But what are the policies and procedures from the nurse to the culinary team, right, to get that back?
Yeah. So it's sort of serving in a catering environment in a hospital. I know peanut butter and jelly is quite popular, but you're like, actually, you need to think outside the box and have something different because of that high risk and touch and contamination.
Right. Mm-hmm. So let's talk about kind of labeling and how we label, and I know the UK has different rules and regulations than the US does, but and I'm thinking about that sign that was in the UK restaurant that says, if you've got food allergies, stay out, right? It was stay out of our restaurant, don't come in here. But people who put gluten friendly or people who put, avoiding gluten, I told you beforehand, it's a conundrum. I mean, how are we supposed to label it?
What we don't want to see. Yeah, what we don't want to see is these, what we term disclaimers.
Okay.
That we use allergens in our kitchen and we can't guarantee, etc., etc. I mean, as I've said before, it's a restaurant, so somebody with a food allergy recognises the fact that there will be more than likely be allergens in the kitchen, but they don't want to be reminded with a big sign saying all our food may contain allergens, because actually what that's telling you is we've no processes in place, we don't know how to manage, which isn't the case. I saw it recently, please beware, any of our menu items may contain and listed, the 14 allergens. Well, really? It just doesn't make sense. So we don't want that. We want clear communication. We want to have a conversation, actually. It's communication. Please talk to us if you've got food allergy or intolerance. We'd be happy to help. And then you have that conversation. Well, I'm gluten intolerant. Well, we'd recommend this off the menu, or, we can provide this dish, or the chef can change this item for you. And it's a conversation we want to build that trust and that rapport. Because also we need to remember, which I talk about in my training, unfortunately, people with allergies also don't like things. so if the chef creates a lovely mushroom risotto and takes it out, and then the guest says, I hate mushrooms,
right,
then the chef's going to be naturally a bit upset. However, I don't like certain things.
Right.
So we have to ask that question too. What is it you're allergic to? And is there anything you don't like? I'll just tell the chef.
Right.
And we have a conversation.
Yeah, absolutely. And it gives the customer the opportunity to say, yes, I want to eat here, or no, I don't. And there will be certain situations in some places where they won't necessarily be able to eat. I did some work with a pub that was up north, and they basically made their own pizzas, and they did their own pizza dough, and there's flour everywhere. And they did a bruschetta type meals throughout the day, like snacks and stuff. And literally it would be impossible for them to a certain degree to provide somebody who was celiac, even with a salad in there, because it was just crumbs everywhere and it was there. But the other thing is not just about turning people and say, well, I'm sorry, we can't serve you, but actually sort of go away. It's about like, well, actually, we can't help you, but there's another place up the road that can help you. Be a little bit more positive about finding, being aware of what places around you can help. Because, it's not always going to be the case that you can do it. You have a fish restaurant, and you have a fish allergy, to a certain degree, you're not going to be able to, because of the way things are managed within that kitchen. So, yeah, again, it's common sense. And obviously someone with an allergy, possibly with a fish allergy, won't go into a fish restaurant. But again, it's, if someone else chooses, it's like, how do you make them more comfortable or whatever? So, it's making communication, I think, like Jacqui said, is what we think is key within our training. To be able to communicate, not roll the eyes and think, oh my God, it's somebody that's got an allergy walking in. And it's being, positive body language and proactively trying to find things for them rather than just throwing an allergy chart at them and saying, oh, just take a look at this and then walking away.
Well, and that's also an issue, because some restaurants are worried about litigation. So they literally will give you the file and say, I'm sorry, we can't advise you, but please feel free to look at the matrix, because they feel that if I've advised them, if Jacqui's advised them and then they're ill, it's my fault. But, that looking through the matrix can be quite daunting, having to work your way through the starters, the main course.
And it's a little tiny font too.
Yeah. So it's about having that confidence to advise them so they can make an informed decision. I mean, recently we went for a meal with my daughter. She'd had a graduation. She graduated last year, but she's now doing a master's. But the graduation was delayed for obvious reasons. And we went to a restaurant in Manchester, an Italian restaurant, and she'd already looked at the menu, which she always does. She'd chosen a dish. She'd checked the allergens, and she checked it was a dish with duck in it. And when she ordered it, the waitress said, "I'm sorry, we've not left." But the manager came over, and she literally kind of sulked. Well, I was looking forward to that, so she'll have to look for something else. But the manager came over and he said, I saw your face when we told you there was none left. He said, I'm actually going to run down to another restaurant, not even the same chain. He said, I'm sure they do something similar. And literally, he ran to another restaurant in the same kind of area and brought this duck, like a duck risotto to her. And that was amazing. And he said, I couldn't let you down. You're obviously celebrating and, please come back again. So she'll go back now because she had a really good experience.
Right.
That's above beyond.
Right.
They couldn't provide, but they went somewhere else, which is great.
Which he checked all the allergens for her, right?
Yeah. Obviously, yeah. It was just a plain duck, no sauce or anything with rice or risotto or something.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, because chefs are confident about what they're making, right? At least that's the demeanor that they put off most times. And so when you're confident in what you're making, then you should be able to say, this is what I can and what I cannot do, instead of being like defensive. And when I started this work, and I'm sure maybe you have had the same thing, is like somebody said to me, you're so passionate, you come off as defensive. And which I get, and you have to come back and, hey, this is educational thing, how do we educate? But the same thing, it's like, chef, we want you to educate. General manager, we want you to educate. How can we provide you a better experience? Yeah.
Yeah. And I think, it's not rocket science. It's not difficult. It's going back to basics. A lot of sauces are out there. You can make them a corn flour, or you can thicken them, or you can have a jus, which is like an unthickened sauce. And one of the things I find really frustrating is, I don't like to have a dry piece of steak or a dry piece of meat. I like to have a sauce. And, just using certain stock pots and certain stocks and stuff like that, you can really, I'm at home, I cook my steak, I throw off a bit of onion, I use a bit of the jelly stock, I put a bit of water on, some corn flour, pepper, and I've got a sauce. It's not really that difficult. And sometimes they just overcomplicate it. I was on a cruise and we went into the 5-star restaurant part of it, and they had Chateaubriand, but I didn't have any sauce. And it was like, and then when I found out afterwards, it said, oh yeah, it was actually quite safe. You could have eaten it, but they didn't know. They didn't like to do it because they didn't want to take a risk. So they didn't really know what was in their food again. So it's like, being aware of what's in the food, understanding it, but better training. And I think one of the things that both Jacqui and I struggle with is a lot of organizations, especially big chains and brands, think they all do a really good job on training. They all think that they have to quite knowledgeable. They tend to use an online training system, when actually when you sort of like try and question a bit further, they don't feel confident. They don't understand. They don't feel that they can provide for that free from customer because of that lack of knowledge.
Okay, so I feel like we're talking about all the things that people need to do. So let's talk about the companies that you've worked with that have made change, and what have they seen as a response? Caroline, before we got on, you and I were talking about Dominic Teague, and I love his story, and because he went completely gluten-free and dairy-free in his 5-star restaurant and didn't tell anybody about it, but his sales went up 25% in 3 months, and his employee satisfaction score jumped 89%. I think that's huge. But do you have other stories like that from customers on, they've done this training, they've done, and they're seeing those kinds of results?
I trained a small pub restaurant locally because he was really keen to support his local. It was a community pub. They were very active in the community. And I did some training with them. I did 2 separate training sessions, back of house and front of house separately. The chefs were actually putting together policies and procedures and improving their paperwork to support allergen management. And shortly afterwards, I think about 3 or 4 months later, he'd been promoting on his social media that they were now allergy trained, would welcome customers. So he said, we've got a little party coming in at weekend with a 5-year-old boy. It's the first time his parents have had the confidence to come out and eat in a restaurant.
Wow.
He said the boy's got peanut allergies and anything else we should do. And we went through the menu. We did have the training. They'd removed selling peanuts from the bar. And I said, you've done everything you can. Unless somebody comes in with a bag of peanuts.
Right.
You have no peanuts at the premises, so the little boy can enjoy. So he said, we've actually put him in a separate area so him and his little friends can have a little play, whatever. So, and the parents were over the moon.
Right.
So, yeah.
Yeah. Carolyn, do you have any other stories like that?
I think it's with the pandemic over the last 2 years, to be honest with you, we've seen the free-from customer not getting as much of a service, so it's been a bit more difficult, but it's starting to build up again. So I'm working with a pub chain that are wanting to do more, and trying to encourage it. So also working with hospitals that want to make sure that they're being positive and proactive with their patients and getting better with the food and the choices and stuff. So I think it's starting to build up again now, but sort of slowly. But I went to a pub near where I am here for my birthday in January, and I'm gluten and dairy free, and it was a roast, and very unlikely that I get much when I have a roast. I don't even expect to have a Yorkshire pudding. And we went, and there was 14 veg, roast potatoes, and I actually had a Yorkshire pudding. It was amazing.
Nice.
So, Yeah, we went back for Mother's Day, and it wasn't that expensive. They had desserts there that were gluten and dairy free. I think in the main, a lot of it at the moment is those people that are celiac or that are gluten free or have an allergy that run an establishment. They're the ones that are pushing it forward, and they see the benefits and the USP and people buying it. I mean, we've sort of said before that if you go out for a meal, so there's 5 of us. If we go out for dinner, and we went out for another meal in February, March time. If I can't have dessert, nobody else is going to have dessert. So that's sort of £4 or £5 maybe. So that's like £30 that they've missed out on,
right?
Which is quite easy money. But actually, there was nothing there that I could eat. Yeah. So again, it's understanding that the economics of it as well, really.
So I've done some work with the local council. So to date, I've trained 550 members of the school meals service team, so cooks, supervisors, catering assistants, because they want to get it right. Because actually, to be fair, when they started in the role maybe 10, 15, 20 years ago, it wasn't so much of a problem. But now there's probably 1 in 5 children being diagnosed with food allergies. And it's not just one allergy, it's multiple allergies. And it's allergies outside the top 14. So the staff members are going home worried. Have they prepared it properly? Are the children okay? So the council have made a positive effort to make sure they're all trained and they've got the confidence that they need to answer queries from parents, to make sure the children are safe, to answer any questions, and actually to help with the wider school knowledge, because it's not just kitchens. There's so many areas within a school where there could be an issue. So that's been really good, a good time for them to do all this training.
Well, and I'm glad that you mentioned that, because it's in school systems. It's not just the school cafeteria, but it also relates to work. There's the work cafeteria. There's the office party that people bring food in. There's the catered events that you bring, variety of things. And even in the staff lounges, right?
Yeah.
And educating people on making sure that their coworkers are safe.
Yeah.
And it's a challenge.
I did some training last year for care homes, and it was a group of care homes, and it was towards the end. And the teams that I trained had the carers, the nurses, and the catering staff, because they felt it should be a joint approach, because obviously the medication could have allergens in, and the medication affects the food, and vice versa. So they felt it wasn't just the responsibility of caterer. So it was a really good exercise. But towards the end, probably the 3rd session out of 10 sessions I was doing, one of the carers was visibly upset when I was talking about allergies. And I said, "Are you okay?" And she said, "I remember a few years ago we had a carer and she died here on the doorstep."
Wow.
And it was a young girl who was 19 who not long joined that care home, and she hadn't told them about her allergy, and she'd left her EpiPen at home. And at the end of her shift, they'd shared cake, which contained nuts. And I was shocked, and I said to the manager, "Why didn't you tell me?" And he said, "I wanted them to tell you, but this is why I was so keen to get the whole team involved." So since then, I now talk about inductions of new staff, because the younger generation predominantly getting diagnosed with allergies. So when they start to work, the full time, because during school they're quite well protected, but when they start into their career, perhaps not so much. So, like you say, staff rooms, staff fridges, events, and actually even on induction day, we ask about, do you have a medical condition we need to know about? They might report diabetes or epilepsy, but not necessarily allergies. And it's important to know, so the rest of their team, the workmates, understand. I've got an allergy, I've got an EpiPen, I keep it here, please avoid. And like you said, the peanut butter scenario and the jelly, we can't have it in our staff room anymore, that type of conversation.
I think,
and
creating creativity. I mean, my son started a new job in January time, just before, around about that time. And within his Easter, he actually got bought a gluten and dairy-free Easter egg. Literally, they did it, and they made him feel wanted. And it's like, that hasn't really happened. I mean, in schools, it doesn't happen. I mean, we know seasonally, like it's Easter at school, they get given a little Easter egg. But he went through about 4 years where he got nothing. And he got given a bag of Haribo, I think, on the last year. But he's like, I didn't mind, Mum, but it wasn't right. Do you know what I mean? And he's trying to make that ways. But the other thing I've seen as well, the teachers get given a gift. and they get given maybe a little box of Quality Street or whatever roses, and then they'll sit at the front eating out of the chocolate box, which has got nuts in it. I know there are no nut school. So again, making them realise that actually it's not just about, they need to think about the whole concept of different things around them.
Right. Exactly. Well, I think we could talk about this for hours and days and things. So how can I've posted your website, the HAS UK, on the chat here. How can everyone else get in touch with you?
So I've got a website as well. So it's jacksallergenmanagement.com. My email is jacs@allergensupport.com. So, and then we've got the joint shared HAS UK website, and we've both got an email address on there. So I'm Jax at HAS UK, and Caroline's Caroline at HAS UK.
Okay.
Caroline's got her own business as well.
So I'm Caroline at FATC, so that's Foxtrot Alpha Tango Charlie.co.uk. I have to keep saying that to get it right. And again, we're both on social media under our own businesses. But yeah, we'll probably see a lot more of the HAS UK stuff coming through later on this year, where we're sort of building that up. Obviously, the near miss report is going to be coming out hopefully around about June time. So we'll be putting that up on LinkedIn and trying to push it, really. I'm just trying to encourage some really good best practice and sharing that best practice as well. Because, food safety, it's not a competition. We need to all get it right.
Oh, I love that statement. It is. It's not a competition. How do we just make sure people are safe? So thank you both for what you do. I am so appreciative to have you both on the show and to talk about this. And as I said the other day when I was talking to Ruth, I mean, this is not a US thing. It's not a UK thing. It's a global challenge that we have with food allergies. And I appreciate so much what you all do. Everybody, thank you for tuning in. And is there anything else the two of you want to say before I sign us off?
Just thanks for the opportunity, really. It's great to talk and get the message out there, really, because, unfortunately, it's still happening. There's been a case this week in the UK, which, just highlights people are still not getting it, and it's not right.
Right.
Yeah, and I just emphasise what Jacqui was saying. There was a young lad that died in the US, I think, as well this week. And we need to get those numbers down. We need to be able to, make it zero, literally. We need to get in there and start being proactive at all of us to try and make life safe for those people.
Exactly.
Thank you.
Well, you're welcome. Thank you. And everybody, thank you for tuning in. I'm Tracy Stuckrath. I'm with Caroline Benjamin and Jacqui McPeake here from the UK. And we're talking about Food Allergy Awareness Week. There's 2 more days in the week, and we've got somebody tomorrow and Saturday at noon. So tune in here and actually tune into your podcast, all podcast platforms. All of these episodes will be on the podcast for audio listening enjoyment as well by the end of May. So thanks, everybody. And until next time, stay safe and eat well. Thanks for listening to the Eating at a Meeting podcast, where every meal matters. I'm Tracy Stuckrath, your food and beverage inclusion expert. Call me and let's get started right now on creating safe and inclusive food and beverage experiences for your customers, your employees, and your communities. Share the podcast with your friends and colleagues at our Eating at a Meeting Facebook page and on all podcast platforms. To learn more about me and receive valuable information, go to tracystuckrath.com. And if you'd like more information on how to feed engagement, nourish inclusion, and bolster your bottom line, then visit eatingatameeting.com.